Good day, I am Kate Marie Getalla, and today's topic is all about another variant of English that belongs to the North American Third Dialect area, and that is Canadian English. In this video, we will run through the history and some examples of the features, such as its phonology, vocabulary, spelling, and discourse pragmatics that are unique to the Englishes of Canada. To start off, Canadian English encompasses the varieties of English that are native to Canada. The term is first attested in a speech by the Reverend A. Constable Geikie in an address to the Canadian Institute in 1857. It is best described as a product of the country's history, born out of treaties and settlement negotiations and migrations between the British and the Americans, a mixture from Canada's closest neighbor and its historic and Commonwealth parent. A brief deep into its history is that from the American Revolution, these Canadians were originally North Americans. So they have American accents, American vocabulary, and American social structures. But they wanted to stay loyal to Britain. But in the War of 1812, they fought against America, emphasizing their difference from them and standing against their closest neighbor. But America has always been Canada's closest neighbor, as well as their most important trade partner, helping to explain some of the shared vocabularies between Canadian and American English. Despite all of that, in a contemporary literature, Canadian English remains as one of the least empirically documented major varieties of English, and its characterization remains linguistically homogeneous. But fear not, because due to technological advancements in the study of speech, the presence of diversity is beginning to elucidate where earlier methodologies have largely detected uniformity. To start things off, in terms of the major sound systems of English around the world, Canadian English aligns most closely to American English, both being grouped together under a common North American English sound system, which is the mainstream Canadian accent or standard Canadian. So one of the most distinct features of Canadian English is their pronunciation of the last letter of the alphabet, to which Americans pronounce as Z, but Canadians pronounce it as Z. In its historical context, Z is from the Greek word zeta, which then changed as ezed in American English, but during the shift in 15th to 16th century of loaning words from French, it has become ezed, and Canadians adopted it and eventually dropped the E, so it becomes Z, since their first immigrants, including the French, were all from regions that used the Z pronunciation. Now, Canadian English has been identified to bear a number of vocalic features which is emblematic of Canadian English. First off is Canadian racing. It is a well-known feature of Canadian English and is widely professed to be its most distinctive trait. The term is used to describe the pronunciation of the diphthongs ow and I, realized with higher nuclei before voiceless consonants, resulting in contrasting vowel sounds in pair. So with the diphthong I, we take the word right. Americans pronounce it as right, but Canadians raise the I sound because the T that is next to it is a voiceless consonant, so they pronounce it as right, right. Same goes with the word bike. The K or K is a voiceless consonant, so they pronounce it as bike, compared to the American pronunciation bike, bike, bike. The second diphthong is ow. The same rule applies, so Canadian English raised the ow before voiceless consonants. Take the word loud. Americans do pronounce it as loud, but Canadians pronounce it as loud, loud. Same goes for the infamous word about. About becomes about, about in Canadian pronunciation. Lastly, the word house becomes house, house in Canadian English. Another vocalic feature of Canadian English is the low back merger. So basically, it is the merging of the two low back vowels o like hot and o like log, which results to homophonous pairs. Hence, in the words cot, as in a small bed for a baby, and caught, which is a past tense of the word catch, are pronounced identically. Same goes for the homophonous pair don and dawn, pond and pond. In Canada, they pronounce these words as cot and cot, dawn and dawn, pond and pond. Now, in terms of vocabulary, Canadian English shares vocabulary with other English dialects. It tends to share most with American English, but it also has many non-American terms that they distinctively shared instead with Britain. So one of the most evident ways in which the lexical stock of Canadian English has diversified and expanded is by accruing new items to designate topographical and biological aspects of the environment in which it is spoken, according to Trudgill in 2006. So borrowing from indigenous languages is one resource that has been mined in the process of lexical expansion. Take the words kayak, anorak, husky, and mukluk. They came from Inuktitut, whereas chipmunk, moose, and muskeg originate in what they call Aboriginal or First Nations languages such as the Ojibwe and Cree. And Iroquoian Kanata, which is claimed to be the aboriginal provenance of the country's name Canada, meaning settlement or community. Lastly, from the French, so Canadian sled dogs like Huskies, Malamutes, they respond to the command mush, which means to run, and it's from the French marcher. So interestingly, a lot of borrowed French vocabulary in Canada reflects the North American geography and the nature of people's lives. So for example, portage refers to canoes that are beyond rapids, and a kabutur describes a postal trade ship. Now, accompanying the vocabulary is the spelling. The Canadian spelling of the English language combines British and American conventions, the two dominant varieties, and adds some domestic idiosyncrasies. But alongside with that, the spellings are also affected by class issues that are at play and the linguistic developments that occur over time, geography, and political influences. So looking at our table that compares the Englishes of the American, Canadian, United Kingdom, alongside with some from the Philippines, is done for more relatable word comparisons. So still focusing on the Canadian English spelling and vocabulary, as you can see, French-derived words that in American English ends with OR and ER suffix, such as color and center are retained in British spellings which have an additional vowel U and a suffix RE or RE. Another would be words such as realize. So they're given their Oxford spellings with a Z instead of an ISE like in American. In the next word, Canadian spelling sometimes retains the British practice of doubling the consonant L when they're adding suffixes to words even when the final syllable is not stressed, such as the word traveling or fulfilling. Now, on the remaining half of the chart, we can see the differences in vocabulary between these four varieties of English. We have an American and Philippine bonnet, while in Canada it is called toque, and it is a hood for British when they were describing a headpiece that covers up someone special when it is cold. This is my bucket hat. It's not the hood, but this works. Another would be backpack. Again, Americans and Philippine vocabulary shares the same word. This one, and this differs in Canadian, it's called knapsack, and in British, it's called rucksack. Same with running shoes, so runners, trainers, and rubber shoes. And the infamous bathroom, washroom, toilet, and CR, and so on. So lastly, we will tackle about the most stereotypical discourse pragmatic feature of Canadian English. It is the particle A. Eh? So qualified by some researchers as a marker of both the Canadian English dialect and of Canadian national identity, it has been depicted as emblematic of Canadian speech since at least the 1950s. So in linguistics, the A is called an invariant tag. A tag is a word, sound, or short phrase added after a thought, shifting that thought in some way. So A is one of the invariant variety because it doesn't change every time it is used. Aside from frequent use, it is also said to be a reflection of Canadian identity because it connotes politeness, friendliness, and inclusivity. It softens a sentence to involve the listener asking their opinion on the matter and including them in the conversation. So, to state an opinion, for example, it was a good movie, eh? Eh? As exclamation or to express surprise, what an ending, eh? To state a request or command, put that here, eh? Or to confirm or soften a criticism, you really messed that one up, eh? It's the narrative A. So A, used in storytelling, denotes that there is more to come. It also engages the listener, using it to make sure that the person is still listening. For example, so I went to this party, A, and everyone there was drunk. So yeah, you might find yourself also loving the word A after every sentence. Now, to summarize it all, English in Canada, America is a variant of both variants. When you think about being stuck between the devil and the deep blue sea, Canadian English is a perfect example of that. Due to the fact that their next door neighbors speak American English, so no doubt that they were largely influenced by it. However, it is to be noted that Canadians strongly resisted the colonization when Americans tried to force them to join. So this showed just how much loyalty they have for the Queen of England. The English spoken by the British and that spoken by the Americans are worlds apart, and the Canadian English took the best of both worlds to create the perfect, unique blend. Second point is Canadian English is more similar in pronunciation to American English and more similar to British English when it comes to spelling and grammar, harking back to a desire to retain links with the British while differentiating themselves from their North American neighbors. As we've seen, Canadian English is a fairly relaxed hybrid. Critically, there is indigenous vocabulary retained, and the French influence is an official language. As a wealthy country welcoming people from around the world, more recent migration means that Canada is richly endowed with a vibrant range of languages, and bilingualism and multilingualism make for interesting vocabulary and dialects. So, as an open and democratic country, Canadian English reflects the country's social and economic present just as much as its political past. That's it for the Englishes in Canada, America. I hope you learn a lot. Thank you for watching.